On day 26 of trial, June 17th, Trooper Paul, the accident reconstructionist from State Police, is back up on the stand, and Jackson cross-examines him. And Jackson brought out the facts that I think probably everybody is talking about, which is the other pieces of plastic that were found later. And he focused in particular on the one in front of the fire hydrant and how very far away that was. And brings up the fact that, look, if the distances are different, then the point of impact is different. Also, that piece of plastic wasn't found in a linear direction. During cross, the witness ended up saying there is no evidence of where John first struck the ground. There is no evidence he spun in the air. There is no evidence that he flew through the air. Jackson wanted to get into questioning as to how the glass could have ended up where it was found, and Lally objected, but the judge allowed this. The witness said, "I don't know. It could have been with him the whole way." Well, if the impact is strong enough to knock off his shoe, how does he hang on to a glass the whole way? The witness also said, "Well, I wasn't there. And by the way, as we go through this testimony today, keep in mind that it all has to be put into the broader context. I expect that Jackson is going to go after some details here, and that's good, and the jury needs to hear that, but the big thing is still the snow. If there was a point of impact at all, well, a number of pieces of evidence would have had to have remained suspended in the air for hours to wait for the snowfall in order for it all to be found on top of snow. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, listen to the last 5 minutes of my last video. John O'Keefe wasn't even out there on the ground at that time. Regardless of what actually happened to him, he was not yet out there at 12:30 or 1 in the morning. The witness admits he doesn't know how the glass stayed with the body. Jackson brings up the cell phone, and that's something I forgot to mention in my last video. The cell phone was found underneath John. Jackson asks him, how did the cell phone end up under his body? And the witness said, it just did. He doesn't know. And Jackson pursues this. He says, how did it fly through the air and then manage to get tucked under his body? How did it do that? And the witness says, it just did. That's the evidence at the scene. And as the witness is trying to convey the concept of, look, I just deal with the evidence I find at the scene, and that's what was there. I didn't put it there. This witness did not put it there. But you know what else? It didn't get there through flying through the air at the same time that Officer O'Keefe did, and then fly underneath him. It would have to have turned around and dropped faster despite it being lighter. So this trooper did not put the cell phone there, but neither did Alexis. Somebody else put John out there. And whoever it was did it after there was a good amount of snow already on the ground. Jackson is able to bring out through this witness that state police do have facilities, indoor facilities, that could be used for inspection. And the point he's proving here is that it wasn't truly necessary for Proctor to put that SUV in the Sally Port at the Canton police station, especially considering he already knew Canton was recused. Jackson uses the state police's own arguments against them. He said to the witness, so if a vehicle has to be forensically examined, you want it out of the elements, right? You don't want it exposed to snow and sleet and wind and all that. And the witness agrees. And this is the point that other troopers also made. No, we wanted it indoors. We wanted it in a controlled environment, in a heated area. And that's why we took it to Canton. Except, as it turns out, there is a facility between Dighton and Canton that's on the way where the SUV could have been taken. And that facility meets all the conditions that the state police have been arguing that they would need. In addition, that facility would have been closer and would have avoided having the vehicle travel through a blizzard, being subjected to all of the elements that they would like to avoid subjecting it to. The witness had said on Friday that the dent and scratches were from the victim's hand. And the witness agrees that you could look at a scratch and you might be able to tell whether one scratch is older or newer, but there's no way to determine a specific date and time when that occurred. And even after having said that, Jackson asks him, so it's possible that these scratches could have predated January 29th. And the witness says no. And that was disappointing.
I'm sorry. I didn't have any information that those scratches were caused from a prior collision. And so when I looked at the evidence, I knew it was in that same area, the right rear tail light. So when I looked at it, it didn't quite fit the pedestrian thing.
It didn't quite fit a vehicle pedestrian strike? Wow! Jackson brings up the glass found on Reed's bumper. And he asks the witness, were you aware that the glass from the bumper did not match anything from the drinking cup? And the witness said he was not aware of that. Jackson asks him, if you knew that the glass on the bumper did not match the drinking glass, would that change your opinion? And Lally objected, but the judge said, can you answer that? And he says, I can't. He can't answer that. And he said, it's just what was told to me, what the evidence was. Do you see how easy it is to be told a narrative, especially if you're being told by somebody you trust? It's so easy to believe that and then incorporate that into your assessment of things. You don't have to be part of a conspiracy. You just have to trust your boss or trust your coworker or trust your friend and either be told a lie or be given inaccurate information. And if this particular witness had years and years of experience at the time, he might have looked at the vehicle and at the scene and asked more questions. At the point when he thought, this doesn't quite fit, he might have taken a different action or asked more questions instead of just doing what he was told to do and trusting that those who gave him the assignment knew what they were talking about. The witness ended up saying crime scene told him that the glass on the bumper was part of the drinking cup found at the scene. And at first I thought he meant crime scene like crime scene services, but then Jackson was saying the crime scene and the witness was going along with it. The witness ends up clarifying. He says that what he thought was that the glass on Reed's vehicle was glass from a cup, not necessarily the cup from the scene, just glass from a cup. I think that makes a difference. The witness did not do testing on the amount of force necessary to shatter a Lexus taillight. Jackson asks about how far John was found from the roadway, and the diagram shows about 7 feet. And Jackson points out that witnesses who saw him said 15 to 20 feet away. That's a big difference. Jackson asked him, would that have changed your diagram if you'd known that? And the witness says, I just put on the diagram the information I was given. Wow. Bad information in, bad information out. This trooper was not trying to do anything wrong. He was trying to do his job. He was told to go reconstruct something that never occurred. He was told there was a crash. He was told to go do a reconstruction of a pedestrian vehicle incident. An incident that never occurred. Jackson makes sure that he has clear, and he's getting the witness to say this again, that what the witness understood at the time was that the CERT team found a shoe the cup, and 3 pieces of plastic, not 5 pieces of plastic. And the witness said, yes, that's correct. So where'd the extra plastic come from that showed up in evidence bags later? And Jackson brings up that this witness, who's supposed to be reconstructing this scene, does not have the benefit of diagrams, photographs relative to other things, so he could even do a scale. And the witness is relying on people's reports. This guy was put in an awful position and told to produce something out of that. Jackson talks about key cycles. And I think what he did here is valuable. And that is to consider the jury and bring out something that Lally skimmed over. And that is that these key cycles have no location associated with them. So if they rely on bits of data that occurred between 2 key cycles, well, there's no locations on them. So they can't say where those things happened. I'm going to play you a little clip of some technical stuff because I think Jackson is going to go through this in a more clear manner than I will.
That arrow indicates top and bottom where your testing occurred, correct?
Yes.
And we move over to the left. That is key cycle what?
1164.
Right. So you've testified, and we turn the lights on. You're all right. I don't mind if that stays up. We turn the lights on. You stated in your report that there were, quote, 2 triggers recorded on odometer 12-629 and key cycle 1162, correct?
Yes.
These events were prior to the testing triggers on odometer readings 12665/12666 and at key cycle 1164. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So what you're saying in that report is the triggering events were 1162, going in reverse in order. 1162 comes before 1164. They're numerical. Is that right?
Yes.
Every single key cycle just tags another number on top of it, right? There's no formula.
Correct.
After 1 comes 2, after 2 comes 3, 4, 5, 6, and then move on, right?
Yes.
So by the time you got the vehicle, there had been 1,164 key cycles on the history of that car, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you knew, when you put in your report, you know, that the triggering events that you see under 1164, those are yours.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's your testing.
Yes.
And you were very clear that the triggers that you recorded, that you talked to Mr. Lally about, were two cycles before that.
Yes.
Meaning ignition cycles, at least, right?
Yes. All right. For that.
In your report, let me finish the point. You said that the mileage difference between these 2 triggers and the triggers that occurred while testing was 36 miles. You just said that, right?
Yes.
And the key cycle difference was exactly 2 key cycles, right?
Yes.
1164, 1163, 1162. That's the triggering events, right?
That's correct.
You also reiterated in your report in paragraph 23, 24, 26, and 29, and also in this exhibit in your CARS report, that the triggers occurred at key cycle 1162, right?
Yes.
You were assisted in your CARS report. I think you mentioned Trooper Zach Clark. Is that right?
Yes.
Trooper Proctor assisted to a certain degree, correct?
Yes.
Trooper Carol Lorini, is that right?
Yes.
Also, Sergeant Sean Good at Canton PD assisted as well, right?
Yes, in a sense.
Did they all read the report before it was finalized?
No.
Did you have any supervisor read the report before it was finalized?
Yes.
And he agreed with the assessments in the report?
Yes.
So in summary, everybody that read the report and you who authored the report believed, and it's reflected in that report, that key cycle 1162 contained the 2 triggers that you're talking about, right?
Yes.
That's the 3-point turn, I guess now 3-point turn, right? Changing direction, and then the reverse at 24 miles per hour, correct?
Correct.
And you even went on and testified to that exact thing under oath in front of the state grand jury, correct?
Yes. Wait, hold on. On the test streams?
On the key cycles.
None grand jury.
Okay. Testified to it on direct examination on Friday and again this morning.
Yes, correct.
If your testing occurred at key cycle 1164, that means you turned the engine on, ignition on, to start your testing, correct?
Correct.
And that triggering event that we see up there at 1164 initiated your testing, all right?
Yes.
All right. So that 1164 is that's where there's no more unknowns, in other words. Right? You know exactly where the car is, who's in the car, who turned the car on, and what the triggering events were, and what they reflected. Correct?
Correct. Yes.
So that would be the cornerstone, basically, of your entire analysis of key cycles.
Say again?
The cornerstone, in other words, the one known that is immovable, it's immutable, is 1164 began your testing. Is that right?
Objection.
Is that right? I'm going to allow the question.
Yeah, that's when the car was in state custody.
All right. So starting at 1164 and counting backward, before you started your testing, you know that the SUV had to be started, the ignition had to be turned over, and it was driven to the Sally Port in Canton at 5:31 p.m. from a tow truck on January 29th, correct?
I didn't know that.
You did or did not?
Did not know that.
Okay. Assuming that the car had to be started and put on a tow truck, that would be key cycle what?
I don't know how. I can't speak to the fact that that recorded key cycle at that time.
Okay. I can't.
I can't speak to the fact that we record a key cycle at that time.
Okay. If the car was turned on and driven onto a tow truck, would that be a key cycle?
I don't know because these keys record different ways, so I can't speak to how or why it did not record on there. All I can speak to is that those are the key cycles. The odometer mileage is more what I was going after on this whole thing.
Super Paul, you just said unequivocally, when a car is turned on and then turned off, there's a key cycle.
I said when the car without the ignition on, that's a key cycle.
Right.
That's correct.
That's what
Yeah.
when it's turned on, when the engine turns on.
That's the definition of what it is. I can't speak to why it didn't go on, why it did not record.
Well, let's talk about the ignition cycles
Okay.
before 1164. Okay?
Okay.
Obviously, the car had to get to Canton PD because you saw it there, correct?
Correct.
Assume for purposes of my question, the car was turned on, and there's a video of it turning on, driving up onto a flatbed tow truck.
Yes.
That would be ignition cycle. I mean, use your word. Key cycle, ignition cycle, 1163, correct?
Again, ignition cycle, key cycles are two different things.
Which word do you want me to use?
If you want to talk about key cycles, key cycles. If you want to talk about ignition cycles, it's ignition cycles when the vehicle gets turned on. A key cycle does not mean to be turned on.
But every single ignition cycle includes a key cycle. You can't have an ignition cycle without a key cycle, correct?
Well, if you want to talk about just use the key cycles and ignition cycles, I'm trying to make sure this gets out. I'm sorry. I'm trying to make sure that this gets put out the correct way.
Every ignition cycle includes a key cycle, correct?
In a sense,
By definition, it has to. Right?
it doesn't have to. They record multiple different ways.
You can have an ignition cycle without a key cycle.
I don't know how it recorded, but it could happen.
Explain that. How could that possibly happen?
Because a key cycle is when it turns on, not engine running, and then turns off.
Okay, so work with me here.
Ignition cycle is when it turns on, engine running for 2 seconds, and then comes off.
Okay, so
Or the 2 seconds is not on long enough, it might not record one.
let's ignore the 2 seconds.
Okay.
That's not what we're doing.
Okay.
All right. Let's assume that it's an old-fashioned type of key.
Okay.
Halfway on, the electricity is on. It's like it used to be called ACC.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
That's a key cycle, correct?
For that intents and purposes, yes. This vehicle's not a key cycle. It's not a
You
thing.
keep turning,
Okay.
and that turns the engine on, right?
It turns engine on, correct.
An ignition cycle, right?
Yes. Well, then turns off.
So ignition cycle necessarily includes the precursor key cycle, correct? Even though every key cycle might not include an ignition cycle. Would you agree with that?
In that scenario, yes.
But with that definition, let me talk about ignition cycles because I don't want to get confused about accessories. But just assume the engine comes on, right?
Okay.
If you start your testing at 1164, then if the engine was turned on, thereby initiating a key cycle, driving the car onto a flatbed truck, and then hauling it over to Canton PD, that would be key cycle 1163 in that hypothetical, correct?
It could be.
Okay. Then going backward from there, if the SUV was, I'm sorry, let me add one event that I just forgot. It had to get off the tow truck in Canton and be driven into the side. Did you ever see that video?
No.
Being driven in?
No.
If there was a video showing that the car was actually driven into the sally port, that would necessarily be a key cycle, correct?
Possibly.
Okay, so that would be key cycle 1163. My mistake, I was missing one, right?
Okay.
Before that, if the car was turned on and driven onto the flatbed to get to Canton, that would be key cycle 1162 in order, correct? We're going back.
It's possible.
All right. Before that, if the car was started and the car was driven from One Meadows Avenue to Karen Reed's parents' home in Dighton, that would be another key cycle, 1161, correct?
They're possible.
Before that, if the SUV was started and driven by Miss Reed from the garage at John O'Keefe's house to Jennifer McCabe's house at 5:07 in the morning, that would be another key cycle, correct? 1160. Is that right?
It's possible.
And before that, if the SUV was started and driven by Miss Reed to the waterfall, from the waterfall to 34 Fairview at approximately 12:15 a.m., that would be another key cycle, 1159, right?
It's possible.
I want to be clear. The reason that these numbers skip in your diagram, they don't go directly in order, right? Every single number is in order on this left-hand column because this is only a diagram of when triggering events occur, right?
Yes.
Something unusual about the operation of the vehicle, correct?
Yes.
And it's clear that from the data, there was no triggering event at key cycle 1159, was there?
No.
So assuming the driving events that I just told you, right? Assuming for purposes of my question, that the driving events started at 1159, driving over to 34 Fairview from the waterfall. Then driving at 5:07 in the morning over to Jen Kay's house, 1160. Then driving to Dighton, her parents' house, 1161. Then the car being seized in Dighton by Trooper Proctor, 1162. Then the car being taken off the flatbed and driven into the sally port at Canton, 1163. Your testing starts at 1164. That would mean that at 1162, that key cycle would include the time in which the Proctor had possession of that car, correct?
No.
Assuming my hypothetical.
You're hypothetical?
Yes.
If that's hypothetically how it works, then yes.
Anyway.
If that's hypothetically how it works, then yes.
Wow, no triggering event at the time that they claim Reed struck O'Keefe. On Friday, this witness had something like 3.5 pages of triggering events. It captures a 3-point turn. So with all those triggering events, when they work it back to when Reed would have been out front of Fairview, there is nothing. Then Jackson got into earlier testimony from Trooper Paul at another hearing. And he'd said during that testimony, that was in June 2022, his report wasn't done yet, but they did have ways to calculate how far a body would travel if it was struck by a vehicle. But those calculations were never reported in this case. And Jackson wanted to know about that.
You were asked, does that remind you that you were asked by a grand jury if you could calculate how far a body would move having been struck by a vehicle?
Yes.
And you indicated, well, yeah, there's certain calculations we can do with that. We'll figure out if you say if the car backed up, hit somebody, and then they go a certain amount of distance, and it's based on miles per hour, the speed of the vehicle, the striking vehicle, and stuff. Remember saying that?
Yes.
What do you mean by stuff?
I don't know.
You said that the calculations would be based on miles per hour and stuff. Did you ever do any stuff to test that? That's the grand jury's question.
No, we cannot calculate anything from this collision.
Say that one more time.
We cannot calculate anything from this collision.
As Jackson tries to get out of him, what would the calculations be? How would you do it? The witness says, well, you can't really. And then he says, well, it was kind of a side swipe. And Jackson says to him, in order to do that calculation, it would be a physics calculation. And the witness didn't seem to understand. Mind you, in fairness to the witness was trying to be very accurate about specific words like key cycle versus ignition cycle. So maybe it was that. I'm just going to give him the benefit of the doubt. But then Jackson said to him, in order to do these calculations, you would have to know the momentum of the vehicle. And the witness said, speed. And Jackson said, well, speed and momentum are two different things. And the witness appeared not to understand that. Jackson presented to the witness a number of things related to physics, specific calculations, some basic concepts. And I say basic, it would be basic for somebody doing his job, or at least you would think it would be. And Jackson was talking over his head. The witness was clearly struggling, and it was uncomfortable to watch. As this went on, Jackson got kind of sarcastic with the witness. The witness says that the taillight was shattered when it struck Mr. O'Keefe's arm. Look, I am no accident reconstructionist, but I have trouble believing that, especially considering that the Lexus taillight in particular is made out of a material that's designed not to shatter. And if that's the case, if she hit him hard enough to shatter that taillight and she hit him in the arm, why is the arm not bruised and broken? And Jackson asked him where on his arm. And the witness answered the upper part of his arm down, basically demonstrating with his hand the area in which we all saw the photos of Officer O'Keefe's injuries to his arm. Tell me that they're not trying to fit the evidence to a narrative. That doesn't mean that this particular witness was out to frame anyone. I still don't think that about this guy. I think he was put in a crap position. I think he lacked experience. He was young, and everybody is telling him this is what happened, and there's an expectation on him to make that make sense. Jackson walks through it with him, trying to figure out, okay, he got hit on the arm, not the torso. So only got hit on the arm, but he remained in place long enough after he was hit for the tail light to basically explode so that it would cut his arm. And then he spun around and it throws him that distance. And a couple of minutes later, there was some pushback by the witness. He said he's not saying thrown. He uses the word projected. But either way, you see Jackson's point, right? And Jackson says, well, that doesn't account for the fact that his arm is on a hinge. Basically, he has a shoulder joint. So why does that not move? And they go back and forth like this. And the witness really doesn't have any kind of reasonable explanation that would be realistic. And Jackson says to him, well, I thought you said he hit his head on the curb. The witness says, well, that's one of the possibilities. And I'm going to point out to you again that no matter the possibilities, John did not remain suspended in the air for a couple of hours waiting for the snow to fall so that he could land on top of it. Jackson wants to know, how do you account for the fact that he doesn't have a broken bone? That he doesn't have a fracture? There's no bruise. And Lally is objecting, and the judge sustains that. Listen to this next exchange and tell me what you think the witness said. I can't hear clearly whether he said, yes, I do, or yes, they do. Let me know what you think.
The truth is, Trooper Paul, you know, having investigated auto pedestrian accidents in the past, that John O'Keefe's injuries do not look anything like an automobile pedestrian accident, do they?
Yes, they do.
This was the morning of day 26. I think I'm going to leave this here and cover the afternoon testimony in a separate video. That's all I have for you for now. Trust your gut. I'll see you in the comments.